All right, well, welcome and thank you to everyone for joining us. We're here live for this webinar on the topic of MSHA's Mobile Equipment Safety Program rule. Now, this is a rule that is gone into effect and being enforced as of July 2024. And we have some great stuff to cover just in preparation for this webinar, talking to our panelists. I've learned so much already. So I've never been excited about regulation and safety as I am about this. So hopefully you'll get some great nuggets out of this. So what we plan to cover today, today we plan to dive a little bit deeper into the new rule. We're going to outline those key elements that are required in your written program, which is a staple of this rule. We're going to talk about who this impacts and also the equipment that falls under the umbrella of this rule. We're going to give you a few resources to help you get compliant. And then we're going to spend some time taking a few questions. So to kick off, I'm Lisa Daniels. I'm head of customer success for Groundhog. We are an AI-powered cloud software. We specialize specifically in mines, and it does expand into construction. And we've got all kinds of products. We've got a whole range of products specific to mine and built for and designed for mining. But first and foremost, let me introduce our panelists for today that will join the conversation. We do have John Fowler. Now, John is a certified safety professional and certified mine safety professional. He has worked all over the world from the Arctic to the Antarctic. He began his career as a mineral exploration driller and then became a full-time safety professional. And with that experience, he now creates articles for various publications, and then he does speaking at some of those safety conferences that we've probably all been to. So welcome, John. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So next we have Ken. Ken is a mine safety professional with over 25 years of experience in the mining industry, most specific to underground. He's worked as a miner, a mine rescue team member, an emergency response coordinator, volunteer firefighter, and emergency medical technician. He is currently a safety and health superintendent at a mining contractor. So Ken, thank you for joining us. I know you're having some technical issues there. We hope that you're able to stay on with us. If you're not, we understand, but welcome and thank you for joining us. So let's go ahead and talk about who this applies to exactly. In terms of operator and or mine contractors.
Yeah, well, the rule is pretty specific. It says it applies to operators as well as the Part 45 contractors. And even if you're not a Part 45 contractor, you're still going to need this to be working on a mine site. So it pretty much, as far as like the types of operations going on, pretty much covers everybody. Now, that would be everybody that's working on surface, because when you really start diving into it, it's very clear that what this program covers is either surface equipment at surface mines or equipment at underground mines that only works on the surface. So when you get into the equipment that goes back and forth either between underground and surface, and equipment that just works underground, that is not covered in this MSHA program. So it's just the surface equipment and the surface equipment for underground mines that only works on the surface.
Right. And I love that you have experience having interpreted this rule, from the very beginning. So I know you've spent a lot of time just trying to understand and get clarity around what type of equipment that actually applies to. So thank you for that insight.
Absolutely. I think MSHA does a pretty good job of really spelling it out. I mean, you can see it right here on the slide. Now, one of the things you need to keep in mind is oftentimes when MSHA talks about mobile equipment, they talk just about self-propelled mobile equipment. But as you can see here in the slide, they're talking about wheeled equipment, track-mounted equipment, rail-mounted equipment, and then they even put in there skid-mounted. And then when you really start diving into it, it says that any equipment that's capable of moving or being moved, which means you start getting into trailers and, like it said before, skid mount equipment. So it's a much broader definition of mobile equipment than the one that MSHA typically is getting into. Really, the one exception to this is hand powered. Is you don't need to have any of this program affect your hand powered, like a dolly, that kind of thing. But as far as all your other equipment, if it moves or it can move, it's transporting people, equipment, or materials, that's going to be covered by this program.
Right. So let's get into the next piece. So we've established who, we've established what equipment. Let's get into the actual documenting this program. Obviously, at the very core of this program, it's about having a written program that's available at all times. So it should be available for immediate access if requested, either by authorities or staff on site. It's also discussed that this written program needs to be maintained annually, and it needs to have a designated responsible person. So at a high level, and we'll dive into those key elements that have to be in the written program, but at a high level, any comments here in terms of additional tips
I
in
just,
the
I
process?
mean, it's a very good outline here. It is absolutely critical that it's available at all times to the miners. That's really one of the big pushes of this program is obviously, like all safety programs, to keep people safe. And in this case, they're really focused on making sure that the miners operating the equipment are safe. So they definitely need to have access to this. This is not one of those safety programs that you write and then you shelve somewhere just to have in case somebody asks for it. This really is designed to be a living document, something that the miners will look at, review, something that operations, the managers will look at and review, and should be always evolving, which
Mm,
really boils down to why you need to have that responsible person is, like I just said, this isn't something sitting on a shelf. This is a program that's supposed to be managed by someone, and it doesn't have to be one person. It could be a couple different people managing a couple different parts, but this is a living document. MSHA, not that I'm speaking for them, but they clearly want it to be some sort of living document where the miners have access to it. You've got a designated responsible person, and those two people or multiple people work together to make sure that as conditions change out of the mine site, that this program itself is updated and stays current with what's going on. Because as we know in mining, things are always changing. And because things are always changing in mining, things are always going to have to change in your written program.
mm, great stuff. So let's talk about that written program and talk about some of those key elements that directly come from the MSHA outline there. There are key requirements that are required in those written programs that MSHA will be looking for. So we've listed a few here. The first two, let's talk about those together because it's hazard identification and risk reduction, both setting it as a measure, but also consistent training. Um, Give us some thoughts and some tips that you're seeing, although this rule is newly implemented, what you're already seeing and some of the feedback that you've seen around in the industry.
Absolutely. I mean, I know it sparked a lot of conversation. A lot of times we think we know what the hazards are out there, and we just kind of, assume we know what they are. But when we start really digging into things and looking at what's going on, and more importantly, actually talking to the miners out there, we realize that there's a lot more hazards than we thought originally.
Mm,
And this is just, really what this is pushing for, this program is getting that dialogue back and forth so that we have communication between what's going on out in the field, the hands-on miners operating the equipment, and the management, the people who can put in place the new, the technology or the new controls, the new equipment that would help reduce some of those hazards out there. But that's really the big thing first is to really look at these hazards, and the way that you find these hazards is, yes, you can sit back in an office somewhere and think about hazards, but you also need to talk with the miners themselves. I mean, when we're talking hazards, we're not talking necessarily these big picture kind of things. We're not talking about massive policies. It could come down to something like low power line somewhere. It could come down to something like a bad intersection. I know Ken is famous for saying this, but he says every mine out there has a malfunction junction. Every mine out there has a place where multiple roads, most of these haul roads come together, and maybe there's traffic control issues, maybe the berms are too high, there's blind spots. But that's really what, in my opinion, MSHA is wanting all of the mine operators out there to do, is to really sit back and work on those hazards. You know, maybe there's a certain stretch of the haul road that when it gets watered, it gets really slippery. Or maybe there's a certain stretch of the high wall or the haul road where you need to put down more road base or something because it's getting worn down, or it always gets worn down. So just to really get back and look at what's going on around you and just talk to the miners, talk to the people who are out there all the time actually operating the equipment and get their feedback about that.
That's probably where that designated responsible person comes into play. That likely to be a major part of that program and their responsibility.
Absolutely. I mean, if you know, all of us know that oftentimes these mines and contractors, everybody, sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And so just by having that one designated person that, you know that if the information gets to this person, he's the one in charge of this program. So you don't have to worry about, something being said to the equipment operators in their area, and then, something being brought up with the guys that are out there grading the roads, and then that kind of information doesn't get back to the person who's writing the program. So absolutely, I think that's why it's so important to have those responsible, and it's also important to keep in mind that it's not just a responsible person. It's easy to think that it's just one person,
Mm.
but you absolutely can have more than one. You can have someone who is responsible for making sure that if there are incidents that they get communicated. You can have someone who's responsible to make sure that if there's a maintenance change, that those get communicated. Obviously, they all have to work together, but you don't need to have one person who's in charge of the whole thing, as far as that's the only one who information goes to. He can also have people working under him who are in charge of certain areas of this program. And that's, I think, an important thing to understand. And it makes a lot of sense because, you're going to have experts. Every operation out there, they have experts, the people that manage the different parts of the mine, and those are the people that know. So it's important to make sure that their voice is included.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that Ken's having some technical issues and can't join us. But I think another key element that really struck me when we were discussing this in preparation was that he said, a big reason and purpose for this is for consistency. So consistency in those training measures and not having to rely on tribal knowledge or paper and administrative type work, that by having that consistent program, those measures in place, somebody looking at those constantly, but then having consistent training um, is a big factor in why this rule is going into place.
That is absolutely huge. That's a great point. That's a huge factor. I mean, if you don't have solid written procedures, if you're not documenting these risks that are out there, then how are you really passing them on to your operators?
Mm.
If you are just relying on the operators themselves to do the training without any kind of backup, and what I mean by backup is those written procedures, the knowledge, the hazards that have been identified, then you're completely relying on the different operators to remember to say the right thing. And I can say that if you're relying on people to remember to say the right thing, most of them will probably be pretty good, but but pretty much everyone is going to forget something or else, and oftentimes that can be very critical. So having some sort of structured format in place for your training will help so much, so that now when someone is training on a piece of equipment, whether it's a loader or a haul truck, not only will they have the step-by-step if they have a written procedure, which once again, I recommend people have written procedures. I'm a big fan, but they'll have the step-by-step of how to complete that task, whether it's inspecting it, the piece of equipment, whether it's driving the piece of equipment. But more importantly is you can take these hazards, and instead of them just being sitting in a dusty program somewhere, you can actually put them into those documents, or however. A lot of people have, I know the company I work for has gone digital, but you can put that information in there. And so now when people are training, they can say, and also I need to remind you that there's a bad junction, there's a bad, or there's some low power lines, and you can actually really get those hazards that you've identified right out there into the field where the miners can use them to stay safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like a lot, but when, especially like what you're talking about, sounds like you digitize. That's obviously something we specialize in. It really saves time. There's no second guessing. It you just get on the job, you do the training, you move on, and we know that everything is covered. So great point there.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's something that I learned. I was a driller for years before I came into safety. And, working in mines, I definitely found out very quickly that the easier things are for the
Mm,
people in the field, the more likely they are going to do it. So the
mm,
more information that you can easily put in people's hands that they can easily access, the better. If you're relying on someone to go open a binder and flip through it looking for a paper procedure,
mm,
I'm not saying that that's not going to work, but you're really relying on a lot of behavior and training for someone to do that. Because we know how it is out in the field with production pressures. A lot of people aren't going to want to take the time to do that. So absolutely, the faster you can, the easier it is, and the faster it is for these guys to get access to that information, the better off everybody's going to be, in my
yeah,
opinion.
absolutely. And we all don't want to get bogged down with admin. This is stuff that we have to get done. But if we can free ourselves up with tools to go focus on what we're hired to do, I'm sure we're all for it. So cool.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about that third one. Develop and maintain procedures and schedules for routine maintenance and non-routine repairs. Give us some insight on what they're looking for in this written program.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say it's probably a safe bet to assume that everybody out there has pretty good routine maintenance schedules, because if the equipment isn't running, then we're not producing anything. So there's definitely an incentive, shall we say, for that to happen. So really what MSHA, and once again, I'm not speaking for MSHA, but from my interpretation of it, what they're really looking for here is this: to audit them, to really take a look at how you're doing the maintenance. And you can see that that fourth bullet point there about technology is just going to keep cropping up
Mm,
again and again. Because when you're looking at your procedures, yes, it's really good to have procedures. I'm, as I said before, a huge fan of written procedures. You want to look and make sure that your written procedures are making sense, and that they're good, they're accurate for the equipment that you have. But really look at things like, how are you tracking the hours?
mm,
How do you know what's going on out there? Are you tracking hours on equipment? Are you tracking hours on wire rope? Sometimes we track hours on accessories and whatnot. So, how are we doing that? Because if you have an operation with hundreds of pieces of equipment, that's going to be very, very overwhelming trying to keep track of all that with a spreadsheet. So really just to stand back, and I'm not saying it can't be done, of course, but just to stand back and just sort of look at that. Even like, and then getting into the non-routine repairs, in my opinion, I think that's where really a lot of the focus in the companies I've been dealing with is on the non-routine repairs. We can always plan ahead for when a piece of equipment is going down. We know roughly when it's going to be coming in to be serviced, but it's those non-routine ones when you've got a piece of equipment somewhere out on a bench in the middle of the night and you've got mechanics out there. Really think about what's going on out there, because remember, this isn't some sort of administrative document. This program is really trying to get the operators and the contractors to think, okay, well, we've got this mechanic out on a bench. He's got production pressure on him, and there's no one around. There's
mm,
no one there who's going to see whether or not he does it the correct way. So let's think about how we can make sure that he has the right information, the accurate information, and let's really think about the tools that we can give him to do that. Maybe more on-call support. How many on-call mechanics are there? Maybe obviously more training, but just really we can put in all the procedures and schedule we want, but we want to make sure when these people are working by themselves that they have the support they need, and think about how to give them that support. And you don't really even have to get all that. And this, once again, this is, you can get as in depth as you want, but there's no requirement in there to list every single procedure on this program. Really, what they're looking for are the big overarching themes. Like maybe you change the oil for light vehicles every 7,000 miles. Maybe you do equipment service every couple hundred hours, that kind of thing. So you don't need to have it super detailed, but you really do want to think about the overarching schedules that you have, and the general procedures that you have out there.
Yeah, I thought that was a great conversation yesterday with Ken, where we talked about it from the different levels. So you could list at a high level your equipment type, dozers, excavators, muckers, yada, 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 and then just list, those routine maintenance and then the procedures for what happens for non-routine repairs. And in Ken's case, he was talking about for his site currently that they actually take it that next level and list out the make and model. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, no, that was a great point by Ken. You're exactly right. I mean, you can go as detailed as you want. You can get a little bit more general. Of course, if you're detailed, you're going to need to stay on it. If you're listing make and model, you need to stay on that and make sure that list is up to date. And MSHA doesn't quite require it. I think there's advantages both of them. I think they're both there's pros and cons to both of them. I know that with the programs that I've worked on, it's more general. So instead of saying make and model, we say, bulldozer, grader, wheeled loader, that kind of thing. But that, I think, is just going to really come down to personal preference, and perhaps to like the size of your operation. How easy, how difficult is it to handle keeping the program up to date with all the different equipment that's out there? And I know if you have underground operations, that might make a little more sense too, because with ventilation plans, you really do kind of have to get into the details of the make and model. So this is just another one of those things where just going to have to step back and look at your particular operation and decide what works best for you.
Fantastic. So this next one, identify current and emerging technologies that can enhance safety. And so for this particular, give us some insight into how, first of all, this is interpreted, but then also, you gave us a wide range of what what technology might mean, from a small device to big autonomous programs and everything in between. So share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it is interesting to see the push for technology. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. I know that on that MSHA stakeholder call, just I think it was a couple ago, they actually had a couple vendors on there talking about the technology. So clearly, MSHA is, once again, I'm not speaking for MSHA, but they're clearly wanting contractors and operators out there looking at what is available. And you can do this from many different ways. You can do this. You can go to, of course, conferences and whatnot. You can even just talk to your vendors. You can talk to the people selling you the equipment and figure out, what is out there, something that you might try. And when we start talking about technologies, just like you said, Lisa, it's a tendency to think about, AI and computer programs and things like that. But it really doesn't have to be like that. I mean, there's definitely a lot out there as far as that type of technology that is really helpful. But, sit back and really look at things. I can tell you from, something that I dealt with for a long time as a contractor when we're working on a mine site. We had battery powered radios because we weren't going to get radios installed in our vehicles because we might only be there for 6 to 8 months a year. Well, we would have like a charging station back at our work site. And so the guys would have to pull the radio out and then hope it was charged enough to drive around on the mine site. Well, not too long ago, mines started giving us actual 12-volt chargers. And that might not sound like that big of a deal, but just rolling out plug-in 12-volt chargers to help charge those radios was absolutely critical to our safety, because now all of a sudden we didn't have to worry about whether or not that radio was going to die. We had a way of charging it in the trucks. So it does not have to be super expensive. It does not have to be rocket science. Even things like parking ditches, look at maybe places where you can put in more parking ditches instead of having to rely on people using chalks for their vehicles. Even buggy whips. I mean, there's a lot of buggy whips out there. The company that I'm with decided to switch to lighted buggy whips. So now all of a sudden we're even more visible. So once again, there's a lot of technology out there, from the pretty basic technology, even some technology like I've been talking about, which doesn't have any computer stuff in it at all, no code at all, no apps to drive it, just different whips can really help improve the safety of the miners. But then if you can keep going all the way up to the LMS systems and to systems which track hours automatically. So there's a wide range. So really step back, go to conferences, talk to your miners, because a lot of times too, that's a great way to hear about technology. Is, we in the mining world we're in a very small world. A lot of people know each other. And a lot of times if something's working, people are going to hear about it and they're going to start saying, hey, my buddy who works over at this mine is doing this or has this piece of equipment that works really well. Do you think we could try it out at this mine? So just, keep your ear to the pavement and just pay attention to what's going on, talk to the vendors, try to be up with the latest publications and conferences, just try to see what's going on. And you're going to probably be surprised. If you haven't done much of this, you're probably going to be surprised about how much there is out there that's available for new technology.
Absolutely. And to piggyback on that, obviously I'm here to talk through a few software type technology to save time, but I did want to communicate to participants that we can see questions coming in, and it looks like you have some questions in particular on the maintenance, and we'll have John talk more on that. We'll come back to that. Just wanted to let you know. That we do see your questions popping through, and we'll get to that. So, partly why I'm here, obviously, is to talk through some of the technology from the perspective of what we do. And what we do is we've got cloud AI-based technology that are helping mine sites do more, safer, and faster. And we've got a whole barrage of products that cover just about every aspect of the mine sites. And from this perspective, on this topic, in terms of safety, what we're seeing an uptick in is in our products, like for fleet management, so collision alert systems, understanding where your fleet, your mobile equipment are. So GPS tracking, on the open pit, real-time tracking systems underground, maintenance within those big platforms. But we also have high demand right now for some of our standalone products, and especially our maintenance management programs. So, like John said, we can certainly manage maintenance programs on Excel. At some point, it does get to a point where you're spending more time managing Excel than you are doing your job, which is to manage your fleet. So that's where these types of products come in. And just like we all have calendar reminders for different things, this is the same aspect where it's got reminders for all of your fleet on when planned maintenance is to happen. And then, of course, it's talking through consistent checks when you're doing those planned maintenances, and then managing those work orders. Another program, obviously, especially for this particular discussion, are safety products, especially our LMS product. We have a lot of mine operators that use our LMS, learning management system, which tracks all of your certifications. I think what most people appreciate most is the QR code for each miner. So that QR code can be put on a badge or on a hat, and it's basically a digital wallet with all the certifications right there. So no more getting stuck at the gate, waiting for someone to bring up or email certifications. A QR code can be scanned, and all of your certifications right there uh, uh, on screen immediately. And then the EHS safety product, which tracks incidents and hazards and manages through those. So if you're interested in any of these products, or if you've got a challenge, please, my email will be at the end of this on the last slide, and you can email me and we'll see how we can help you there. Because we want to free you up from admin work and really get you focused on doing what you guys are meant to do. So moving on from that. So let's talk a little bit about enforcing the program. It's new, I get it. But what, in your experience, what are some of the things you're seeing in the field?
Well, we haven't yet had MSHA come along and ask us for this, but we're contractors, so we've had a lot of clients ask us for this. Um, so it's definitely something that, people are going to be looking for. And I think the more proactive you can be, the better off. It's a lot better to come prepared than to show up on a mine site, hope that no one's going to be asking for it, and then all of a sudden have somebody ask for it, and now you're scrambling to put it together. So it's the only reason that it hasn't really been asked yet is because we're just a couple weeks into the rollout of this. So without a doubt, this is going to be something that MSHA is going to be asking about. And I think one of the things that you really need to keep in mind is that it's not necessarily that MSHA is going to be coming to different contractors or operators and saying, let me see your, your written program. They're going to be focusing on the miners, in my opinion. Now, that's what I think is going to happen, is that they're going to be out there talking to miners and saying to them, hey, do you know about your written program? If so, where is it? Have you looked at it? Because there's such a big driving force that MSHA is putting in place to make sure that these operators and contractors are communicating with their miners. So, I mean, I think that's really, when it comes to enforcing, something you need to focus on is making sure that the guys working out in the field, the girls working out in the field, that they need to know about it. They need to know where it is. They don't have to know necessarily, it backwards and forwards. But and once again, this is just my opinion, but if an inspector or someone, or even a client coming out and looking at contractors, if they say, to the company, hey, do you have a written program? And the company, oh yeah, no, we have a written program. And then they go out in the field and they say, so what about this mobile equipment program? And the guys working in the field go, what? The what program? Now all of a sudden we've got a problem, because that is one of the big things with this program, is to make sure that it is a two-way street, that you've got information coming from the miners and that you're sending information to the miners that are working out there. So I think
Yeah,
that's gonna be a big thing, is make sure your people know about it. Like I said, they don't have to have it memorized, but they definitely need to know that it exists and where is it, and if possible, just a little general about what it's about.
yeah, that's a great point. It's not just a tick the box, here's my program. It's about the execution and the roll down communication of it all. Great
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some resources available? Of course, the MSHA site, you can pull up the final rule to dig into details. They have a template available on the site, along with many other resources. And we put the links here. And we will send this presentation out to all of the participants so that you can dive deeper into that. What we've done is we as Groundhog, we've taken the MSHA template and we've built it out a little further. There are some parts of the template we felt could be provide more clarity and give a little more prompting to help build those written programs. So we've also created a template, and we will it's a free template. And we're offering free consultation to help you get started on that. So if you're interested, please feel free to email me. My email address is right there, and we'll begin, and we can share the template and get you started with that. You can also reach out to us via groundhogapps.com, and we can get connected there also. Were you going to
And
say something,
Lisa,
Brian?
I was going to say another a good resource I was thinking about. I mean, these are great resources, but really when it comes to enforcement, uh, it's a good idea to be proactive with that.
Mm.
And MSHA has I guess a branch. I'm not sure how to describe it exactly, called the EFSMS, which is Educational Field and Small Mine Services. And they're really there to educate, like they say. They're almost like consultants to help you. I definitely think they're one of the more underutilized parts of MSHA. But when you decide on your template and you start putting this together, in my opinion, it's a great idea to go to the MSHA website and to figure out who your local EFSMS person is and reach out to them. I know I've had nothing but good experiences with them. They'll definitely just take a look. They're not going to say, of course, that this is MSHA approved or anything like that. But they are going to be able to take a look at it and say, you know what, this looks great, but you might want to tweak this, or you might want to do this, and offer really good and really good suggestions. So I think it's a really good idea that before you roll this thing out, that you have somebody take a look at it, have them take a look at it, and just sort of make sure it's covering the ground. Like I said, this isn't like a silver bullet. This isn't going to mean that when MSHA shows up, you can say, "Oh no, this was EFSMS approved," but they can at least steer you in the right direction, and really give you some very good advice and very good pointers about what the final product is going to be. Like they're not going to really tell you about the template or anything like that, but they'll look at what you've created and sort of, like I said, just give you some advice and point you kind of in the right direction if you're missing a couple things.
Okay. Um, it looks like, moving on, it looks like we have some time now to take some questions, and there have been several questions that have popped through. So I think what I'll do is I'll just sort of take them in order. Uh, so we have Kevin Martindale, who had a question on, need some help understanding how this works for contractors.
Well, if you're a contractor, if you're a Part 45 contractor, you're going to need to have your own program. So you're going to have to come up with your own written program. If you're not a Part 45 contract, if you don't have MSHA ID, then you're going to have to work with the mine that you're going on. But regardless, sort of as your contractor status, you're going to have to be in compliance. You're going to look at the equipment that you have and come up with a written program for yourself. Now, I don't know, depending on your size as a contractor, not only can you reach out to the EFSMS, but you could also talk to perhaps the client that you're working for. I know a lot of these big mining clients are more than happy to help the contractors come into compliance, because once you're on their site, they're going to want you in compliance. But it's definitely something you're going to have to, it's definitely something you're going to have either yourself or through a mine that you're working at. Unless, of course, you are underground, because that's something we have to keep in mind, is that if you're a underground contractor, if you just have equipment that's operating underground, you're not going to need this safety program. The safety program would just be for surface mobile equipment and equipment, even if it's underground mine, equipment that only works on the surface. So I hope that helps. But
Yeah,
yeah.
and we had somebody comment. Obviously, the question came through on the through the webinar chat, and we have Matthew Bruner, who added that you have to, for the written plan, you have to demonstrate training program, method of maintenance, repair, and operation of your mobile equipment. And I think he made a great point here, in that he's saying don't overthink it. That you may already have a lot of this in place, and it's just a matter of getting it all into one place. And I thought that was a great comment there.
That is a really good comment. I could not agree more with that. I mean, I think most of us have all of this, but just like he was saying, it's sort of spread all across different policies and programs. And really what this is doing is gathering it all into one place. But also, I think it's really the drive of this is not to produce a written program. The drive of this is to really get all the operators and the contractors out there to think about what they're doing. It's kind of forcing you to really look at the hazards, to talk to the miners and figure out, what you need to be concerned about. And then you can get into training and schedules and whatnot. But I could not agree more with that. I think that's dead on.
So Kevin also wrote, we're an engineering company and we only use pickup trucks to come on site occasionally. We're not sure how this would apply.
If it's a surface mine, I mean, if it's a surface mine, because there's a specific line there in the MSHA, the new regulations, and it says powered equipment transporting people. So my understanding is that you are I know that in my program, the programs I've worked on, I've included the light vehicles as well. I mean, that's mobile equipment, and you're going to have to put a written program in place. If you don't have an MSHA ID, I believe you're going to have to work with the mine and perhaps come under their program or something like that. But I would work on getting a program for yourself, and it should be a pretty easy program. I mean, it doesn't have to be super in depth. I mean, you can just put in there that, for the equipment, once again, we kind of talked about earlier, you don't need to list out. I mean, some people can, some people do, and some people can, but you don't need to list out every single make and model. You can just say light vehicle, you can just say light vehicle pickup truck. And then you can have in there for, maintenance. You could say we change the oil every 7,000 miles. I don't know, we rotate the tires every, 50,000 miles. And then you can talk about, how you track the oil changes and whatnot. So it really doesn't need to be some kind of big, super long, in-depth program. It's really just an overview of how you operate. And like I was saying, and like was the comment that was made, this is most likely stuff that you're already doing. I believe that really, once again, I don't speak for MSHA, but I think MSHA's big push here is, yes, you're going to gather all this, but look at technology, and you put down the program that you're going to go to a conference, you're going to talk to your vendors, you're going to talk to even the mines and the mines that you work for. And maybe one mine has, the lighted whips, and you decide to put lighted whips on, or you decide to try out a proximity detection system. They're really going to want even a smaller contractor to look into that kind of technology.
Yeah,
And
which
there
was
is
perfect because
definitely a
you
lot out there.
answered, and it's perfect because you just answered the next question is, do I have to list every single maintenance procedure, how specific or detailed? So, I think that you
Yep.
hit on that one, no
I
problem.
know when I first, I can tell you from my personal experiences, when I first started hearing about this, and just from talking with some of the people that I work with, sort of the assumption was this was going to be the most in-depth, sort of giant program where you're going to have to list every single procedure you have and all the different maintenance and everything. And you can absolutely do that if you want to. But just from sort of, like I said, talking with different people and looking at how this rollout has happened, yes, obviously detail is very important, but by no means do you have to go way into the weeds. You can stay relatively general. Like, MSHA is not going to, and once again, not that I'm saying that this is some sort of guarantee, but they're not going to be wanting lists and lists and lists and lists of all your procedures. They just want to make sure that you have plans in place. You understand, for instance, on the non-routine maintenance, you want to know, okay, what happens when there's on call? What happens when a piece of equipment breaks down? Do you have somebody who's in charge? What kind of training, what kind of equipment? Do you have procedures out there? Do you have actual written procedures that these guys can follow? And then when it gets to the training, how are people being trained on this equipment? It's once you step back and sort of look at it, it's really not quite as complicated as it
Mm,
seems. It's a lot more general.
yeah, makes sense. So we touched a little bit on this. If a production operator or Part 45 independent contractor identifies hazards as part of the safety program and these hazards are not addressed in the Part 46 or Part 48 training plans, does the operator modify the safety program, training plans, or both?
I would definitely modify them. I mean, if you're like, you need to make sure that you're capturing these kind of hazards out there. Um, I would make sure that, as as your miners are talking to you, that you are recording them somewhere. Now, once again, I wouldn't get too in depth on the training plans and on the training programs. In other words, I would keep the written safety program as the place where most of that is caught. But if you do come across a significant hazard, that was not recognized before, I would absolutely go back and change the training plan.
Makes sense. Um,
But I wouldn't do it for, like I said, I wouldn't do it for the smaller, more minor hazards. I would really focus those on, keep those in the written safety program. Because if you all of a sudden have two of these programs that you're trying to keep up and both of them are very much in detail, it's going to be really hard. So I guess just to be clear with my answer, I would put most of them in your written safety program. But if you come across something that's pretty significant, I would at least look into adding it to your other programs as well.
yeah. So, do you think MSHA will make a list of mobile equipment safety measures? Has there been any discussion on that?
Um, Not really. I mean, I haven't heard of any discussion on that. I know that they've they talk about stuff. I haven't seen an actual big list of this. I know that in some of the, the templates that are out there, even the templates that are out there on MSHA's website, that you can look in there and see that kind of information. But I really haven't heard about any MSHA list like that. It's more like listening to what they say during the stakeholder call, and then looking at like some of the information that's been on the templates. But like once again, I think, it's not quite as complicated as people think it is. You don't have to really get into the weeds on some of this.
Yeah, fair comment. All right. Well, it looks like um so it looks I'm just looking at other questions here. Does the standard apply to small vehicles and autonomous autonomous vehicles? Um we touched on that, but that is interesting. I assume this would also apply to the autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, I don't know why it wouldn't. I'll be honest, that's something that I haven't really looked into. But I mean, just reading the way that the standard is written, I don't see any reason on earth why it wouldn't. I mean, those probably come with a whole new host of hazards.
Yeah,
And really, they talk about breaking out the standard into wheeled, and they don't say you have to do this, but all the examples get into the wheeled equipment, skid mounted, rail mounted, track mounted. And I mean, just I don't work with autonomous, but if I was writing up a program like that, I would put autonomous in its own category, because it's pretty obvious that when you talk when you're dealing with an autonomous piece of equipment, that there's a whole host of new hazards that are there. So I'm about 99% sure. I mean, yeah, it's going to cover your autonomous. I don't know why I'm hedging. It's going to cover your autonomous equipment. I personally would break it out and put it into its own sort of category, so you don't just have the wheeled, skid mounted, etc. Um, because, like I said, there's going to be a whole new host of hazards involved with that one. That's a good question.
yeah, great question. So typically, um, who who is the responsible party for this? Safety manager, um, EHS. I think you touched on it a little bit that it could be several people. Uh, what are you seeing so far, or have there been recommendations from MSHA on this?
Well, there haven't been any official recommendations. I can tell you that some of the MSHA people that I've talked to, not on the record, so this is not some sort of official MSHA proclamation, but it definitely, I guess the way it was put to me was, just remember you can have more than one responsible person, like hint, hint. So I think it makes a lot of sense and to have multiple people. I mean, you'd want to have, for instance, kind of like I mentioned before, maybe your equipment manager who's in charge of the maintenance stuff. So if they change a maintenance policy, if they change what happens when, you have on-call mechanics, he's going to update the overall responsible person, because there is going to be one overall responsible person, but then under that person, there can be people that are responsible for the different areas. Just like your safety director, he's going to be typically responsible for updating the overall responsible person if there's incidents or maybe something they hear about, an MSHA fatalogram that comes across. So all these people working together. And it was even this mentioned to me too, when it comes to responsible people, that and once again, this was just passed on to me, but not to use actual names. So you don't want to say, for instance, like John Fowler is responsible for this. Is in your program, you can put in there, safety manager or equipment manager, and just have the title. That way, if you've got different people moving into those positions, you don't have to constantly be updating your written program.
That's a great tip. That's an excellent tip. Well, very good. Do we have any other questions from our participants? Great. So John, I'm just recapping what we talked through here. Obviously there's a written program that is expected to be available, but it's not just about a written program. It's about the executional rollout and making sure that that program is made available and all of the staff on site understand where to find it and what it consists of, and that they're knowledgeable on that. You likely not to overthink it is probably a key to this conversation that we've discussed. Not to overthink it. It could be just pulling together what you already have into one document. Obviously, there are a lot of tools out there, and certainly from where I sit, there's lots of technology in the form of software on our side that can help relieve some of that admin side of things, so that it's just automated, ready to go, and you can focus on doing what you're hired to do, whether you're in maintenance or a shifter, or in safety. And lastly, we wanted to just let anyone, ah, oh, we had a question just pop through. How often does this need to be updated? And that is an annual, it's expected on an annual basis to be updated and maintained.
Yeah,
John,
at
I
least,
don't know if you want to
yeah,
add
at
anything.
least an annual. I mean, I really, this is kind of like I mentioned earlier, it really should be a living document. So yeah, annual, that's great. But I mean, if you're updating this thing every couple weeks, I think that's really good. If you, especially I think in the beginning, I think that the programs that we roll out right now are probably going to look different than the programs we have in 6 months, let alone a year, because we go along, we roll these out, and they're going to go out there, and all of a sudden we're going to start saying, well, you know what, actually we didn't think about that, or we didn't realize that was there. And the more, once again, I know I keep going back to it, but the more involved the miners are, the better. So hopefully there's a really steady stream of information coming back to the responsible person, so that all throughout the year they can work on incorporating all the various lessons learned and the various hazards that are out there, and just make it better and better. I
Yeah.
mean, it's really, we haven't had a great couple last weeks. I mean, this rolled out on July 17th, and a few days before on the 12th, there was a powered haulage fatality. And then just a few days ago on the 25th, there was a powered haulage fatality. Obviously, powered haulage is one of the more hazardous things we do out there. And MSHA has just been looking at what's been going on, and they really want operators and contractors to get a handle on this. So I think it's good. It's too bad sometimes that you almost have to, I guess, force people to do this. But it's good that MSHA is now incentivizing people to really look at their mobile equipment, and figure out, okay, how are we doing things and how can we do them better, from technology, fancy technology, AI and all that, to, like I was talking about, like battery chargers for the radios. So yeah,
And I,
just
And I
Constantly
think,
look at it.
yeah, I think you make a good point also that it goes beyond just annually ticking the box and let's update and review.
Yeah,
It likely is also as new, like you mentioned, things are constantly changing on site. So it could be as you learn, as you say, as you learn of a new type of hazard or a new somehow you could do training better. That's where that living breathing document is constantly being reviewed.
absolutely. And like I was saying earlier too, is, I would bet that the MSHA inspectors are going to be asking the miners, and so the more input you can get for them, the more involved they're going to be, and that's what I'm sure the everyone wants to hear is when you ask someone running a haul truck, "Hey, what about this safety program?" You want them to say, "Oh yeah, no, I'm glad it's there. I was just telling them the other day about this junction. There's the berms on this, at this, intersection are too high or something." I think that's in a dream world what everyone's going for.
Well, now we've got questions coming like
Oh
crazy. So yeah. Uh, does this written program require MSHA approval? So once you've written this program, do you have to have it approved by MSHA?
no, no, you don't. You do not. No, you don't. Like I was saying earlier, I think once you have it written up, I think it's a great idea to reach out to EFSMS and get their opinion, the educational people. But you don't have to actually send it in to be approved.
Good question. Um, so yes, John, yesterday you had mentioned a new tool that could be an example of newly emerging technologies. So what in your written program might you be saying? How does that piece of the written program, what does that look like? Which I think is a good question because are you just ticking the box saying, yep, we looked at new technologies and no, it's not a fit this time, or yes, it's a fit and here's our executional plan and timeline. What does that section look like?
I mean, it doesn't have to be necessarily, once again, this in my humble opinion, it doesn't have to be as specific as I've tried this, it didn't work. I've tried that, it didn't work. I think really, and this is my interpretation of it is, well, let me back up. As far as actual program goes, you can put in there, I go to conferences. I have talked to the
Hmm.
vendors and things like that. But what, MSHA is really, and once again, I'm not speaking for them, but they really want you out there trying that out. So you can, I think as you start finding new technology, put it in there. But it doesn't need to be a long, and once again, you can do it as detailed as you want, but it doesn't really need to be like a list of we've tried this and it didn't work. We've tried this and it didn't work. Really, where are you going for this? They want you, or they seem to want you to be involved as possible. They don't want you to be completely cut off saying, you know what, we've been doing this for 30 years this way, and this is the way that we're going to do it. So I don't know if that's answering the question or if that's enough.
No, at least I thought it was a great question because even
Yeah.
I wondered the same thing, and it sounds like you just need to log that you're at least making the effort to understand what else is out there.
Yeah, exactly. I think once again, I think that they are just trying to get you to think about all the different ways and to encourage you to go to these things.
Mm.
They really would like people going to the different conferences and talking to their vendors. They want people out there and being proactive about it. They don't want someone just sitting back and waiting for someone to come along with new technology. They want you out there looking around and asking questions and really the the vendors are a great place to go for that. The same people that are going to be selling you the different parts and pieces of mobile equipment or the mobile equipment themselves would be a great place to go to say, hey, what can I do about staying ahead of technology? Anything from, is there a newsletter, a publication that goes out, Or, are there some good conferences that you suggest? Is there a place I could go to learn about this? They just really want you to identify gaps there and say, you know what? Yeah, we MSHA is, kind of encouraging us to do this. So we're going to start trying to be a little more out there, go out there a little bit more and go to some of these different conferences and whatnot and see what's really out there.
Yeah, great insight. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. But want to thank everyone. Reminder, it's a written program. Don't overthink it. You likely already have the info. There's lots of different types of technology out there. Please reach out. Groundhog would be happy to talk with you. Get free consultation on the template that we can provide to at least get you started on that written program. There are lots of tools out there to help you do your job effectively. So you can get rid of the admin and focus on what's important. We'd like to remind everyone that this is a live LinkedIn webinar, and we did record it, and it will be available to everyone to continue. If you'd like to come back and revisit this, we'd love for you to share this with your colleagues. And most of all, if you have questions, please give us a call or reach out. I've put some contact numbers here. We have Satish, who's our CEO, and then myself, of course, Lisa, head of customer success. We'd be more than happy to take any of your questions. John, want to thank you for your time. Super valuable information here. Lots of nuggets of information at all levels. So thank you.